think of early horror games in the 2010s, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Maybe the glorified walking simulator that is Slender the 8 Pages, or maybe the atmospheric gem that is SCP Containment Breach, or maybe the infamous horror game about killer animatronics trying to hunt you down for 5 nights straight, developed by one man who just did not know when to quit. A game that was so influential that it's still being talked about 10 years down the line. But why? Why is it that a game with such a simple concept and premise ended up inspiring a generation of creators and is still being talked about over a decade later? Well, there is actually a lot more to this game than meets the eye. Hi, my name is Sean Smith and welcome to FNAF and How It Changed Horror Forever. Five Nights at Freddy's is an indie horror game developed and published by Scott Cawthon. Its initial release was on August 8th, 2014. In the game you play as Mike Schmidt, a newly hired night watchman at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria establishment. Your goal in the game is to survive one working week at the establishment, with your shift starting at 12 AM and ending at 6 AM. Throughout the night you will be hunted down by murderous animatronics, with the game increasing in difficulty as the week progresses. In order to survive, you need to use your CCTV system to monitor the location of animatronics at a given time, and use the mechanical door systems to lock enemies out. However, do be cautious, because using the doors and the CCTV system will drain power, and if the power reaches 0%, well, to simply put it, it's game over. With such a simple premise, you're probably wondering how exactly this impacted an entire generation of creativity. Well, if you're asking that question exactly, then you are the reason why I'm making this documentary. You see, Five Nights at Freddy's is like an onion. The more you peel away at it, the more layers you discover, and you'll come to notice that this game is a lot deeper than what initially meets the eye. In order to help dissect this gameplay for you, I'm going to break down the gameplay into two core elements, visual and audio, and I'm going to be discussing these core elements in said order. The gameplay of FNAF 1 at the time was very unique, whereas in other horror games, like for example the previously mentioned SCP Containment Breach, when a threat is in front of you, your option is to run away, hide, and wait for it to lose interest in you. Not in FNAF. In Five Nights at Freddy's 1, you are completely stationary in your office. You are not able to move, leave, or do anything to combat the animatronics besides shutting the doors. Meaning, when said animatronics are at the doors, your only option is to shut it. There is no running, there is no hiding, none of that. It's kind of like a nightmare scenario. We've all had those nightmares where, you know, a killer is chasing us and you're trying to run away, but it feels like you're in quicksand, and then the killer grabs you, they're about to kill you, and then you wake up. Five Nights at Freddy's perfectly captures this nightmare scenario. But of course, with it being a video game, there has to be a win condition. And that win condition is 6 AM. The visual aesthetic behind Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and even its sequels is very unique, and it's something that I have not seen another horror game outside of the fan games try and implicate themselves. Scott likes to take the idea of having a family-friendly pizzeria setting and completely twisting it and putting it on its head. Taking the once beloved and friendly environment and putting it in cold, harsh, dark conditions. Almost like it's haunted by some supernatural threat. Coupled by the animatronics being out to kill you, it's a perfect dynamic. You're able to see just how dreadful this environment is just by flicking through the CCTV cameras. Even when an animatronic isn't present on screen, you can still feel the tension and the fear building up through the visuals alone. This contrasting theme, taking something childlike and meant to be enjoyed and making it horror-based, adult, scary, if I say so, It's completely different to anything else we've seen in horror games before, and perhaps the target audience for Five Nights at Freddy's is people who have been to locations like this. Chuck E. Cheese is a massive comparison to Five Nights at Freddy's, and for very good reason. Chuck E. Cheese is a family-themed restaurant. It has animatronics, it has pizza. It's everything FNAF is, but it's not scary. Five Nights at Freddy's is taking the childhood of players and completely twisting it and amalgamating it into something that is almost unrecognizable, something horrifying, stressful. This sense of twisting something that was childlike is also embedded into the animatronics designs. No matter at what point you see the animatronics in, they're always standing in some uncomfortable, unnerving, twisted position. This phenomena that Scott has captured with his visual aesthetics isn't coincidental. In fact, it actually has a name: the Uncanny Valley. The Google definition refers to the Uncanny Valley as a common unsettling feeling people experience when androids or humanoid robots and audio/visual simulations closely resemble humans in many respects, but aren't quite convincingly realistic. This was the first major implications of the phenomenon into video games. However, thanks to FNAF's influence, it's now become a lot more common in other horror games, for example Poppy's Playtime. With Poppy's Playtime being set in a children's factory manufacturing toys where the toys have gone sinister and are out to kill you. It's a different kind of horror Scott implemented into Five Nights at Freddy's. Something very different to what we were used to in the early 2010s, which is one of the many reasons to why it was so impactful and revolutionary for the indie gaming scene. The visual connotations didn't just appease the game's aesthetic, they actually extend into the game's gameplay. For example, Foxy. Foxy requires you to monitor the cameras in order to lock him in place. Failure to do so often will lead to him slowly but surely escaping the cove. With each phase of him leaving the cove, he becomes more twisted and uncanny in his appearance, until eventually he's absent from his original spot. Upon realising Foxy's gone, if you open camera 2A, you'll be greeted with an animation of him sprinting down the corridor, heading towards your office, requiring you to use your reflexes to shut the door in time, otherwise he'll get you. The reason why this is so unnerving is because outside of the jump scares, this is the only instance where animation is actually used. Scott was really clever in the way he utilised the game's engine, Click Team Fusion. With it being very limited, he kept animations to a minimal in order to save memory and make it so that he could use animations on more important things like the jump scares, game over screens, and Foxy running down the corridor. One final thing that we can discuss about the visual aesthetics is the many secrets and Easter egg screens hidden throughout the game. There are 8 documented Easter eggs hidden inside of Five Nights at Freddy's, with most of them being visual, but some of them having audio connotations too. The majority of these Easter eggs do not affect gameplay at all. For example, the rules and safety poster in one of the cameras can sometimes change into a newspaper clipping detailing devastating events of children who went missing at a pizzeria. Furthermore, the posters of Freddy in the game that you can see throughout the corridor cameras can sometimes change into these horrifying drawings of children crying, obviously complementing what's detailed in the newspaper clippings about children going missing. However, there is one infamous Easter egg that I want to talk about in particular, with this Easter egg being the Golden Freddy encounter. Every time a frame is loaded in the game, there is a 1 in 100,000 chance that this encounter can happen. And if you are lucky or unlucky enough to hit the number threshold, then the following thing will happen.
Okay, I'll leave you to it. See you on the flip side.
Ah! Oh god! What the f? What the f? Okay? Not okay!
As you can imagine, it is very hard to get this encounter to happen, with me personally not being able to get it with my gameplay as well. All of these gameplay features and visual aesthetics help immerse the player in this haunted world that Scott has portrayed. The pizzeria location is undoubtedly uncanny because you wouldn't normally associate a pizzeria with haunted killer animatronics and ghostly encounters. With the fantasy of going to a pizzeria location, eating food and watching the animatronics dance and sing for you is now haunting, with the animatronics leaving their remote locations and are actively searching for you, waiting for you to make one wrong move which will lead to your demise. Now that we've talked about the game's visual aesthetic and how Scott used the uncanny valley to create a stressful and frightful environment, it's now time to discuss how Scott Cawthon further did this with its audio presentation.
London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down.
Sound design is the aspect in the game I wanted to personally talk about most, because I feel without it the game wouldn't be half as impactful and scary as it is. Sound design is something in media as a whole goes really underappreciated, but it's actually a main pillar that makes up what the product is. And I feel that Scott uses audio cues perfectly in Five Nights at Freddy's to not only embed its gameplay, but to further build upon its uncanny atmosphere. In Five Nights at Freddy's, the sound design can be broken up into two main components: aids and hinders. Aids are audio and sound cues that at first may sound just irrelevant, there to scare you. However, upon playing the game further and really paying attention to the audio, you'll come to discover that these are actually meant to help you and give you cues without directly showing them to you. Whilst hinders are the complete opposite. Although they may sound important, they actually do not affect gameplay at all and are just there to disorientate the player. A simple but an effective example of an aid is the one of 4 pots and pans sounds that can be heard throughout your playthrough of the game. You'll notice these pots and pans sounds quite early into your playthrough. Although at first they may seem a little bit jarring and maybe irrelevant to the overall gameplay as you're trying to look for animatronics, if you pay attention and decide to investigate the noise, you'll discover that it is coming from the kitchen cam, which is coincidentally the only camera in the game where you actually can't see anything through it, likely due to limitations with the Click Team Fusion engine. Upon investigating the pizzeria, you'll discover that the animatronic Chica is completely absent from the cameras, meaning she is hiding in the kitchen causing all that ruckus. Upon continuously playing the game and you start to develop a strategy, you'll subconsciously realise that when the pots and pans are playing, Chica isn't necessarily a threat, and you know exactly where she is on the cameras without looking at her. Another clear-cut example of an aid in the game is Freddy's laugh. From night 3 onwards, the animatronic Freddy will activate. Freddy works a little bit similar to Foxy, but slightly different at the same time. Like Foxy, he requires you to watch the cameras in order to keep him stationary, but unlike Foxy, you have to be staring directly at Freddy at all times in order to keep him from moving. If you fail to do this, he'll move from his original location and continuously head towards your office without stopping. However, something you'll notice is that every time Freddy moves, he will emit this horrifying laugh that sounds like some supernatural threat is taunting you from the distance. And also coupled with the fact that Freddy is naturally hard to spot on the cameras unless you're really paying attention, which means that Freddy's laugh is meant to act kind of like a timer. Every laugh corresponds to every movement he makes on the cameras, meaning through gameplay and trial and error, you can start to form a strategy where every time Freddy laughs, you will be able to suss out exactly where he is in the camera positions. Scott is intentionally trying to make the player use their brain and use their head in order to form strategies with these aids, as using the cameras too frequently will cause the power to drain significantly, meaning once you realise these sound cues are actually of importance, you can start to build tactics in order to beat the game, with you subconsciously not looking for Chica when you can hear pots and pans, and also knowing exactly where Freddy is at all times, even when not looking at the cameras. However, at the same time, with it being a horror game, there are also just some downright scary audios that may seem important in the grand scheme of things, but as doubtful as it is to say, you're overthinking it. I think a good example of a hinder is Foxy singing in Pirate Cove. What was originally thought to be Freddy singing is actually Foxy emitting his Showtime song in Pirate's Cove. Upon hearing this for the first time, your first instinct, including mine when I first played the game way back when, was that this indicates that Foxy is on the move. Which it actually isn't. If you dig deeper into the game and play the game for yourself, you'll discover that the singing doesn't actually mean anything. It's just some random bit of ambience meant to disorientate the player and cause confusion. Foxy will move regardless if he's singing or not. It just doesn't really matter. Now you have some example of aids and some example of hinders. Now it's time to tell you how Scott created a character that embeds both of these pillars together to create a really unique character that I think doesn't get talked about a lot. This character I'm referring to is what many on the internet refer to as Phone Guy, as it's unclear in the lore what his name actually is. Phone Guy is the only other human character in the game. Sorry, hold on, my phone's ringing. That's really strange. Thought I had it on Do Not Disturb. Hello? Every night you have a voice recording left for you by the Phone Guy. Phone Guy is the previous night watchman before you, and to help you get settled into the job, he leaves you 4 voice recordings detailing you information for how to combat the animatronics. It also gives lore implications. You find out from Phone Guy that you need to use the doors to keep the animatronics at bay. However, doing so will drain the power.
I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night. So just be aware, the characters do tend to wander a bit. Check those cameras and remember to close the doors only if absolutely necessary. Gotta conserve power. Alright, good night.
During the beginning nights, Phone Guy's information is actually useful. He tells you that you need to use the cameras to monitor the animatronics' locations, you need to use the doors to keep the animatronics at bay, and you need to have the cameras open in order to stop Foxy and Freddy from leaving their positions. However, as the nights come on, this information becomes not only more scarce, but less useful, and it gets to the point where the information actually hinders you more than helps. An example of this is how during the later nights, when Phone Guy is living lore implications, he can actually talk over important sound cues like the sounds of pots and pans in the kitchen that I previously mentioned, making it that you will miss important sound cues which could actually lead to a death if you're not paying enough attention. A more direct example is how during the night 3 phone call, Phone Guy says this.
If you happen to get caught and want to avoid getting stuffed into a Freddy suit, try playing dead.
But as you'll come to find out, this actually makes no change to the gameplay, and if you follow his instructions, it will actually get you killed, leading many players by night 4 to mute the call. However, if you let the night 4 phone call run, you'll discover a soundscape.
Oh, hey, wow, day 4, I knew you could do it. Hey, listen, I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me. I'm kind of glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did. Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm going to try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. You know. Oh no.
A soundscape is where audio is used to tell a story, and it's been done so efficiently here by Scott, as by now most players would have opted to mute the calls, meaning they would have missed this interesting and unique bit of storytelling. Strangely enough, there is actually one final voice recording on night 5, but I don't even know where to start with telling you what's happening in it. Scott has perfectly used Phone Guy to explain gameplay to new players whilst keeping it clever and immersive. Modern games are too keen on shoving explanations in your face that rip you out of the immersion and water down every mechanic to you like you've never played a video game before, which is why replaying FNAF 1 was such a breath of fresh air for me. Phone Guy doesn't break immersion, as it would make sense for a previous employee to leave you recordings to help you get settled into the new job. It explains basic mechanics to new players to help them get started, as the line implies, but at the same time it's discreet enough to make it so that it isn't watered down and easy to grasp, encouraging those to keep playing and playing to understand the mechanics for themselves and also to form a strategy. And most importantly of it all, nothing is explained visually, it's all audio based. So now that you understand why FNAF was so scary from a visual, gameplay and audio aesthetic, you're probably now wondering how this simple surface game warranted 10 sequels, an 11th that's soon to come out, and thousands of fan content. Well, rather than me telling you specifically, I've conducted an interview with a FNAF game developer by the name Better85, also known as Conrad Honey. This interview should hopefully shed light from a game developer standpoint to why FNAF was so inspirational and what exactly encouraged him to create his game, Tubbyland.
Hello, I'm Better85. Real name Conrad Honey. I guess I'm a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's. That's why I've been brought in here.
Yeah.
The creator of another game that's also Five Nights at Freddy's based by the name of Tubbyland. Probably the reason why I'm even here in the first place. I want to encourage you to make Tubbyland. That's a good question, because it was a lot.
Okay, good. Say everything.
I think some people might be familiar with another game by the name of Five Nights at Tubbyland. It's a pretty old FNAF fan game by this point. If you put them side by side, you can definitely see where the inspiration comes from, but they're definitely not the same game. I'd even go as far as to say it's not even really a fan game, it's more of like a rewrite, really. A lot of elements from the original Five Nights at Freddy's games are obviously used, such as the door and the animatronics. I think in terms of like where a lot comes from, I'm not really sure, but you could probably draw parallels to both of those, I think.
And then obviously Five Nights at Tubbyland itself is inspired by FNAF. You're saying that you were mainly inspired by Five Nights at Tubbyland itself.
Yeah, Five Nights at Tubbyland is obviously supposed to be Five Nights at Freddy's, but Tubbyland is both of these games. I'd say both of them inspired me just about the same amount, really. I don't think there's a sole contributor to the creation of Tubbyland.
So like, what do you think of the FNAF community itself?
But from what I've seen, it's 50-50, I'm gonna be honest. There's a lot of cool stuff, and there's a lot of good people. But then you've got the other side of it that's quite questionable, I think.
Yeah, I fully understand what you mean, because there's been way too many controversies. Like, as good as the FNAF community is, and I will like proudly talk about like how creative everyone is on there, I can't even deny that it's a bit flawed. Like, we had that whole FNAF Plus incident and stuff like that. It can sometimes get really messy. That's interesting though, because my whole documentary is I wanted to like talk about what FNAF did differently and how it like inspired others to do things similar. But like, it's interesting that you noted that it's flawed as well, because I didn't even consider that when coming up with the idea for this documentary. Because like, maybe like if people get too inspired, it like comes to a point where like maybe they're like a bit competitive or like trying to like stand out in like really absurd ways. So will you continue to take inspiration from Scott and, you know, Five Nights at Teletubbies and whatnot in your like future works later down the line?
I don't really know what other future works could involve Teletubby animatronics. Maybe some more FNAF stuff. Probably some other stuff.
So like FNAF stuff that isn't necessarily Teletubbies related?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, that makes sense, I see that. Final question, and the most important question, is where can the viewers watching this documentary find Tubbyland?
You can find Tubbyland at gamejolt.com/game/Tubbyland/835585, or search Tubbyland Better85 on your web browser.
Additionally, there will be a link to Tubbyland in the description of this documentary. To summarise everything that was just said, Five Nights at Freddy's proved to the indie gaming space that horror games can be more than just cheap jump scares. They can create a truly tenseful, scary, and stressful environment just from visual cues, audio language, and unique and strategic gameplay alone. I feel this game came at a perfect time, as there was a drought of genuinely good horror games that are out to be smart and horrifying. And also with FNAF being such a simple surface concept in general, it was easy for other developers to pick up the idea and take it into their own. with the term FNAF fan game now being its own genre of horror, which goes by the name of mascot horror, which refers to any horror that takes something childlike and innocent and twisted and contorts it into something horrifying and scary, with the most popular example being Poppy Playtime, Bendy and the Ink Machine, and Garten of Banban. And even more specifically, the thousands of fan content that can be found online is just downright inspiring to see how one man encouraged others to do what he did, but even better, with some of the more modern FNAF games being completely deprived of what the original source material was. I think a good way to demonstrate this is to show you gameplay from an older FNAF game and a newer FNAF game, with the older FNAF game being Five Nights at Candy's.
Whoa. Hello? Yes? Hi? Oh boy.
And the newer FNAF game being Oblita's Casa.
R.I.P. Minnie. This is a completely different type thing than what I've been used to doing, right? Huh. Oh shoot, dude. What the frick am I supposed to do?
As you can see, as the years went on, it became less about trying to imitate what Scott did, and more about making it better, making it unique, and making it your own. Now, with the original question of the documentary answered, a new one does emerge. Where does FNAF go from here?